a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but that beauty.
Which one? Did I write the wrong one away?
The one who saw him to let them know what the king who would reign over them proclaim as his right.
I put the wrong one down.
Big country cane, big homie, what it is? I'm just gonna rap straight off of these. Now, everybody wanna be the king, go to South when they ain't running the damn thing, but they mouth, no doubt, it's all good. Y'all just stay y'all king. But in the South and in the hood, it's understood. Without saying it's a given. And then because of what I'm doing for a living, it's more because of what I do and how I'm living. Not to mention when I'm rapping, I'm just heard chicken living. Still chilling on Simpson and Center Hill. Make provisions for the clique and continue keeping it pimping. Whether crack was in the house, record sale through the ceiling. So say what you want, do what you please. But for fun, I shoot 22 for your shoes to your knees. I run a record label and a crew of G's. So it's looking to come and look for you if a sneeze or even breathe the wrong way. You better do what the song say and be easy, else it'll be a long day. Money goes in the pockets of my jeans. I'm a kid. Good see me and dream. I'm a kid. Top all of your backstage. I'm a kid. Everybody leader of the team. I'm a kid. But I can get you blocked now. I'm a kid. Really cool with the top chop. I'm a kid. I'm connected nationwide, but in the South. I'm a kid. Make it and keep my name out your mouth. I'm a kid. I'm a French starter, don't get it twisted. Big calling shots in the bar, clothes existed. And still 5 birds on my mom will get to your money. Even play the birthday, still that vision. I got so big. Make a fake picture, what you know about that? I keep a bad window with that first top back. My jeans feeling tight, got my pockets stay back. You better know that. My nigga got so much angry beat. Big chain, niggas keep on hanging. Got a Hollywood, and the broad to be singing. They be hating cause I'm famous, not what I was thinking. For every car, looking back in the past. Me, I just think that the gold in this to be nasty. I'ma stay falling up my old school class. The strap got big bank, and see if you can match. I ain't clothes in the pockets of my jeans. I'm a kid. Good see me and dream. I'm a kid. All of your backstage. I'm a kid. Everybody lead up the team. I'm a kid. But I can get you blocked now. I'm a kid. Really cool with the top chop. I'm a kid. I'm connected nationwide, but in the South. I'm a kid. Expected to keep my name out your mouth. I'm a kid with the king. Somehow we the greatest. Number one hustler. Keep the street blazing. If the brakes don't sell, I drive up and sell race. While y'all cherry picking hustlers out here slaying that game. When it runs deep in my brain, pump through my heart, live in my bone marrow, man. That's pimpin'. My game is premium like Octane. Can't tell me nothing about stacking these bitches. My king, jersey seated in the throne. Overruled other dudes like Caesar did wrong. You're the president, so dependent, and the order so strong. The South been represented like this is so long. I'm an emperor, you just be glad I'm working on my temper. Otherwise, I got to do system, listen to your temper. Disrespect us, I'm a flipper till I get the straight stuff. Grass, knuckles to your dinners, blast suckers in they dimples. I'm a kid. I ain't clothes in the pockets of my jeans. I'm a kid. Good see me and dream. I'm a kid. Top all of your backstage. I'm a kid. Everybody lead up the team. I'm a kid. But I can get you blocked now. I'm a kid. Really cool with the top chop. I'm a kid. I'm connected nationwide, but in the South. I'm a kid. Expected to keep my name out your mouth. I'm a kid.
Okay. Welcome to the Wilson Hour Show. I'm your host, Michael Phelps from the Wilson Hour Group. As I always state, that Wilson Hour Group is an educational group. We talk about problems as well as we talk about solutions. We have a pretty interesting topic today. You know, a lot of my fellow brothers was cheering me on to say they want to hear about this topic. So I want to make sure we bring some understanding to what how leadership looked at one point in time in life, and how it's still kind of looking the same, but we in different modern times, you know, but same characteristics, same behavior seems to pivot back or always seem to be elusive to us to understand why we have so many conflicts within our leadership. So we want to just go on and break down some of the styles from three major kings in the Bible. I just found fascinating that I thought that, maybe we can look at them and kind of like get an understanding on what this thing, what kings look like. And when we call kings, I'm calling leadership. So I'll let my cousin introduce. My name is Michael Phelps from WUAO, and I was showing that the king introduced himself.
Raymond Carlisle.
Okay.
For today's topic. Today's topic, what can we learn from King Saul, King David, King Solomon, three kings of Israel in today's times? Number one, listen to the Most High and obey. David's life was about listening to God, obeying his instructions. In contrast, Saul did not take time to listen to God's instructions.
Okay. And how important was that for Saul not to listen to the instruction of God? Because I think that sometimes maybe some leaders maybe don't take the time to listen to God before they make decisions when it comes to affecting the collective.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of them I think they take personal, they're looking at their personal situations,
Mm-hmm.
And they deal with things through personal lenses where, they have, they're looking at how they can benefit for themselves, or maybe the task before them is is more than they expected. So maybe they got derailed because of, they didn't have enough support. So maybe so what they did, they formed an alliance with those who have power. Maybe you think that might be what some of the things that might have got a lot of them that.
Well, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of things that feed a person's desire
Mm-hmm.
to take it onto their group, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's a route that you should take, and there's a route you should not take. But oftentimes, what you find, especially in today's world, as you look around, oftentimes a lot of people in a lot of different organizations, higher positions, take the route that they should not take. And that route that they should not take often is called compromise.
Hmm. Can you break that down? Break down compromising. What that look like?
When one compromises, it's almost like a turning away from of the established standard.
Hmm.
Where there's a way you do things. There's an expectation. Just like when you have, it's like we're about to enter on the inauguration tomorrow, actually.
Yeah.
People voted in a president. So therefore, people who have voted for this particular president have in their minds, they have certain expectations, right?
Yeah.
So, and then of course, a lot of promises were made. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get in office, right?
Yeah.
So, but then oftentimes, what occurs, not just in that, but other political arenas as well, which is why people don't too much like politics, because in politics, it's a lot of quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Quid pro quo, and that means scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So you do some favors for me, and I'll do some favors for you. Well, oftentimes that requires you to compromise standard.
Yeah.
It requires you to make adjustments. So in the biblical times, when the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt, first thing He warned them about was not to give themselves to the other gods, not to serve the same gods of the people of the lands which they were going to serve.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing He told them. He said, don't give your wives, don't give your daughters to their sons. Don't give your sons to their daughters. And there's a reason why He said it. He said, because they're going to turn your heart away from me. So He warned them about, so to speak, leaving the standard.
Yeah.
Okay. He warned them to stay true. Now, oftentimes people allow themselves when people, and it's easier said than done, but people have good intentions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm gonna be faithful. You know, I mean, you can use that. There's so many different arenas, you know, some different aspects that we can approach this from, where people make promises and say because they have good intentions,
Yeah.
right? But then when the pressure shows up, okay, that's when it counts most.
Yes.
Okay, when the pressure's on, will you stay strong under pressure? The pressure of whether you're trying to get a promotion, what are you willing to do to get that promotion? The pressure of someone saying, well, they're going to invest in something for you if you move money around and make things work for them. Okay, if you take money from here and put it over there when you know it's supposed to be here and it's supposed to be for this reason, but you took it from here, and then when you're asked about it, I don't know, but you do know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, like I said, that's just kind of an idea of what we're talking when we talk about compromising. It shows up in many different forms, and that is what destroys kingdoms.
Yes, and and Saul it was very interesting because he was picked by the people. The people.
Well, Saul was chosen by God. He was picked by the people because the people wanted the king. Right?
Yes.
But he was chosen by God. Okay. If the people had never said, "Hey, we want a king to be like all the other nations," Saul would have never been chosen. Okay. But because the people wanted a king like the other nations, that we want to be like them. Okay? God, the Lord warned them. Okay, well, do understand? And you want a king like the other nations? Okay, they're going to be about self. Okay, it's going to be selfish, right? So, but when you look at it, Saul didn't start off that way.
No.
Saul started off humble.
Yes.
Okay. Saul recognized that he was from the smallest tribe. From the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah.
The smallest tribe. Okay. So Saul, at that point, didn't think highly of himself. So therefore, he was doing what he was asked to do initially. Okay. But when tested, okay, and this is the thing that always crushes every leader. When coming under pressure of a test, will you stand true to who you presented yourself to be?
Yeah.
Who you said that you are. Okay. When the Lord gave Saul an assignment, and that was to destroy the Amalekites.
Yeah.
Okay. He gave him a simple assignment: destroy Amalekites, destroy everything, don't keep anything.
Yeah.
Right? Destroy it all.
Because everything's contaminated.
Everything's contaminated. Look, the Lord had already made a decision about what was good and what was bad. And from his perspective, from the Lord's perspective, everything was bad. Destroy it all. Don't keep anything. He didn't say nothing about keeping the king. He didn't say nothing about keeping jewelry. He didn't say nothing about keeping the best of the sheep. He didn't say keep it. He said destroy it all. From women to children to animals, livestock, everything. Wipe them out. Okay? Because he was doing away with the sin.
Yeah.
Okay? Wipe it all out. Now, so Saul received these instructions. Right? So you would have thought, okay, he's going to do exactly what the Lord told him to do. Right?
Yeah.
Humble man, okay, go in here and do what the Lord tells him to do. Saul starts making adjustments.
Try to please the people.
Saul was more concerned, and this is often what happens. Okay? But it's not just about the people, because when you think about the politics of the world that we live in today, it's not just about the people. Because we're democracy.
Yes.
So to speak, right? So we're democracy. We know it's not about the people because people always complain that even after they get in it, they don't do what they said they were going to do. So we know it ain't about the people.
Yeah.
But it is about people in powerful positions and other people who have a whole lot of money.
Yes.
Okay,
Who can influence them?
who can influence decisions,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, it's about people, but it's a different group of people, not the
Yeah.
same people, but
Yeah.
a different group of people.
Yes.
Saul was more concerned when the people started to scatter from him. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, man, he said when Samuel said he's supposed to wait for Samuel to show up, right?
Yeah.
And instead of waiting for Samuel to show up, he says, "Man, we haven't burned incense unto the Lord. You know, we haven't sacrificed unto the Lord. And man, he's not here. Boom, I'm going to do it." Now he knew good well that wasn't his place.
Yeah.
Okay, he knew he wasn't a priest.
And most leaders think jump in other positions when they know they should stay in their own lane.
Exactly. They know they're supposed to stay in their own lane, but they jump in someone else's lane.
Yeah.
Okay, so they become self-important. Okay, Saul became self-important. Okay, at one point he was humble and he wasn't self-important. They were from the smallest tribe, so you know he came in thinking, "Oh well, man, Lord chose me, man. I'm so honored. The Lord chose me, and man, I'm from a simple tribe. Man, matter of fact, we're the smallest tribe." Okay, he could have chose from any other tribe. Man, he chose us, and then he chose me. Wow. Okay, so he was humbled by having been chosen, but then later on changed. And a lot of leaders come in just like that. They're humble coming in, having been chosen by the people.
Yeah.
They're humble coming in, having been promoted. Okay, humble coming in, wanting to make a difference. I'm going to come in, I want to do this, I want to make all these great changes, right? And then the money comes. Then here comes the money.
Yeah.
Here comes the power. Here comes the influence. For a lot of men, here comes the women. Okay, so now what you said you were going to do takes a back seat.
Yeah.
Because now other things have drawn your attention. This is where the compromise comes in.
Yeah.
This is where you start making adjustments. Because you know, whether it be, you know, in today's world, whether you talk about police departments or whether you're talking about judges or whether you're talking about lawyers, or you're talking about
pastors, congressmen, senators.
I mean, it's just like it's just like, and not saying that they're
employers.
All that way. Yeah. It's not saying that they're all that way, but there are those who have been found having taken payoffs. Okay, to make a decision to go against their better judgment.
Go against their moral compass.
Go against, you see what I mean? So when you go against your better judgment, that is a compromise in of itself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes, and that's a moral decay. You allow something to take you from your moral decay. I mean, your moral consciousness. When we talk about it, when I was looking at Saul, I was looking at how many men who are in leadership position is actually literally called to be in that position. Some are self-appointed. So, and some are appointed by homeboyism, I call a clique. So then they appoint someone they know that they can control.
Right.
So when they're picked in in that area, you're gonna get what you pick, what you picked, because they're not there to serve to its fatality or what they're supposed to be serving. They're there because someone put them in place there, and then the person that put them in place has an agenda. So then within that agenda, that person doesn't have realm to do what they need to do to navigate to change, to make the necessary changes. And that's what it seems like that's what we're dealing with when we talk about community. We talk about a lot of our leaders. It's like a lot of them are just handpicked. But they saying that they said like God put it on their heart to do this or do that. But you always see that, maybe in the beginning that did start off, God did work with them, and maybe God did put it on their heart to do such, and then all of a sudden they did a U-turn for whatever reason it is. I know I heard some say that the community let them down. That they didn't support them. They didn't back them. Then I just know in our community, you don't see a lot of our dollars backing our political figures. So therefore, we don't buy our agenda. We don't put money behind our agenda. So what that does, that leave room for other cultures or communities to put money behind that individual, and then that person's interest is where they're at, and that's what happens. That's what we see a lot of. So I wonder how do we combat against that, and they can take accountability, because a lot of them won't take that accountability and say, yeah, y'all, these people put money behind me. They don't want to be honest with each other. Well, I got it off because these people put money behind me. They backed me. They supported me.
So they paid for their agenda.
Yes.
To be heard.
To be heard.
And if you wanted your agenda to be heard, and they said, well, you should have paid me. Basically, lack of a better way to put it, you should have paid me, and I'd have spoken on your agenda. But since you didn't want to pay me, and they paid me, I'm speaking on their agenda. So basically, I'm for hire.
And that's the nutshell. That's what happens, and we have to ask ourselves. That's what we call today politics. Now Saul was different. There was no. I don't think there was no pain behind that. I think it was just more so the outcry of the people, the soldiers, and then like, man, we won, and look at all these beautiful women. Let's take the spoils of war. And he allowed them to do it, knowing that he was given a instructions, a direct order not to. But see, since they wanted it, and he felt like, well, what harm is it going to be? That's how he looked at it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, again, that's where the compromise came in, because it was, but we took the best of the best. Oh Lord, we're still serving you.
Yes.
We took the best of the best, and we're going to use these things. We're going to sacrifice them. We're going to sacrifice the best on you. But the Lord had already said, none of it's any good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But what Saul turned around and did, and what the people ended up doing, what they did as a unit, was made a different decision against the Lord.
Yes.
And said, well, Lord, I know that you said it's all bad, because they didn't say these words, but their attitude spoke this way. Lord, I know that you said it was all bad, but you know what? We found something.
We found some good in it.
So therefore, so we need you to go along with us.
Okay.
Yeah. and that's a lot of times what happens.
Yes.
In politics.
Yeah.
Is that you come with an agenda, and you say, hey, this is something that needs to be dealt with, right?
Yeah. Someone
else pays them, and it's, well, you know what? I know we met, and I know we agreed on this, and I know this is what I said. And a lot of times they're not going to even say, I know this is what I said. They're going to dance right around that too. And says, well, I didn't say that. What I actually said was, or, well, I don't remember. Or they get amnesia. Well, I don't remember saying that, but, along these lines. And then all the news stations start going in and start playing back little snippets of what they actually said. And say, well, you did say it. Well, that's not really what I meant. And it's like, that's what Saul did.
Yes.
Yeah. Saul was like, when Samuel showed up.
He bojangled us.
Yeah, because when Samuel shows up, he's like, Saul, what have you done? Saul came out and saluted Samuel. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
He came out, saluted him, and said, well, I've done everything the Lord does. No, wait. So Samuel asked a simple question. What's this with this bleating of the sheep? Okay? Because if you truly did everything that you said you were going to do, politician, okay, if you really truly did what you said that you were going to do, then how is it that there are still sheep alive? Because you were supposed to wipe out everything, okay? But you decided to keep some things, and so no, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. But and then Saul wants to go, well, what's the big deal? We kept the best of everything. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, we can share this amongst the soldiers who's starving, who's this and that.
Right.
So he found excuses for everything he was doing.
Exactly.
And a lot of our leaders do that. They find excuses for bad behaviors.
Justify their actions.
Yes.
You see, when you start justifying action, everybody can find a reason, but you find the same thing it ain't just about politicians.
No.
You find the same thing in the community.
Yes.
Okay, you
Yes.
find the same thing in the community.
Yep.
Where you got people breaking into
At
people's
work.
houses.
Yep.
You got the same thing in community when you got people stealing from stores and then they're raising prices. Okay,
Yes.
you got the same thing in the community where people take people's cars without permission.
Yep.
You got the same thing in community where people feel like they could that they own other people's property.
Mm-hmm.
You got
They just walk out of a marriage.
right.
You know.
You got all these so what we're speaking about is a mindset.
Yes.
Okay, that's what we're speaking to. We're speaking to a mindset to address why this mindset or the effects of having this mindset and what it brings about and how we see it manifest in the community.
Yes, yes, and that's true. What's number two? What do we have for number two there?
Number two is own up to our mistakes as men and women. Great leaders own up to their mistakes.
And now we just touched on that a little bit.
David? Saul.
We just touched on we were just talking about it. We need to own up to.
Yes.
Now we want to talk about own up to our mistakes. Now I don't think, but David owned up once he got called out. Once he got called out on it.
And the thing was that it was different. It was funny how David got called out because David was given a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when the scenario is not about you, it's real easy to see.
It's
really easy for you to make a quick snap decision.
Mm-hmm.
And David made a snap decision given the scenario of which to happen to a man that takes another man's wife.
A rich man takes a poor man's possession.
Right.
Yeah.
It was so, but when it was brought to his attention, well, David, that's you. Then it was a whoa.
Yeah.
It was a wake up call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
well, before we get to that part, let's go into because I want to go into the behavior before that because this is something that I don't think a lot of people really dive deeper into.
Okay.
I want to get into the part where after he used his kingship to seduce the man's wife. The woman was she was seducing him and he was seducing her. They had two different types of seducing. She was on the balcony taking her baths. She knows that the king was going to come out at a certain time to see. So she did her seduction. And the king knew he had power that she liked. Because obviously she's over there she wants to entice the king. She don't want just anybody. She wants someone with power. So there's seduction on both ends there. So then after they got past the seduction, now they're going to the intimacy. Now they're being intimate. And you know that intimate couldn't have been just one day. It had to been it had been going on. Then she ended up getting pregnant.
Right.
So now here comes the shift in some because there's rules there. Because by law, if she's caught in adultery, she's supposed to be stoned.
Stoned to death.
So I always want to know the twofold of that story because if she's supposed to be stoned, wasn't the man supposed to be stoned as well?
Well, the focus was more so always on the woman. However, in that particular instance, you see that, of course, David wanted to cover it up.
Yes.
Okay.
With no remorse.
Right. Well,
yes.
He's trying to hide it.
Yes.
Okay. And it's what
everybody do.
Most do.
Yes.
Most often do. They want to hide what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They've thrown a rock. Okay. They've hit somebody.
Hide their hands.
As soon as that person turns around, everyone want to hide their hands. I didn't do it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, David slept with Bathsheba.
Mm-hmm.
She got pregnant.
Fornicated.
David knew this was.
Yeah.
David knew that he got her pregnant. So now her husband, he tried to get the husband to hurry up and sleep with the wife so that he could try to coordinate it and make it seem like it was the husband's baby, but it was really David's baby.
Mm.
Okay?
That's a good disguised scheme, but you know what I mean? How many leaders do you think that pulled the same crap on us to this day?
Oh yeah. I mean, people always joke about the milkman back in the day.
Yeah.
Right?
The plumber and the
Yeah,
milkman.
plumber. I mean, people always told all these little jokes.
Yeah.
You know, when you look, man, you like the milkman. Remember back Mr. Crow back in the day? Oh, that's why you like the milkman. You know.
Mm.
But the reality is that you've got to look at the crime that was done.
Yes.
Okay. But what led to it is
Yes.
more so important.
Mm-hmm.
We could sit here and we could talk about the crime in of itself. We could talk about the compromising of itself. But what I think is more important to talk about is a mindset that led to it.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because see, I'm a firm believer that, remember we talked about, weeds.
Yes.
You pull a weed from above ground, it's going to grow back.
Yes.
You pull it from above ground again, it's going to grow back. However, you pull that weed up from the root, now that weed is not going to come back because you pulled it up from the root. So when you're addressing crime, you have to, it's better to address it at the root.
Yes.
Okay. Which is more often than not the mindset that led to that. Because in order for someone to engage in a certain activity, they first must have a mindset to engage in that activity. Okay. Well, we know David loved women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's how he ended up with Bathsheba. He loved women.
Yeah, other concubines.
Right. Right. And so it was but David honored. It was like he honored God, but he loved women. So David
was wrestling.
David was wrestling.
Yes.
Okay.
Which a lot of our leaders do.
A lot of leaders do. They wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're when Jacob's name was turned to Israel after he wrestled with God. One has to be willing to wrestle with themselves.
Yes.
So what we do know is that David made a mistake. David showed that mistake after it was brought to his attention. Now, of course, he didn't admit it at first. Okay, but once it was brought to his attention, well, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
He repented. Okay, for thee and thee only have I sinned, Lord. Okay, he repented. Okay. Now David did end up being with Bathsheba.
Yeah.
They did end up having a child. Okay, but there was a consequence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
David had to accept that consequence. Now this is the most important thing when you talk about when you're contrasting David's attitude versus Solomon's attitude and Saul's attitude. You look at how David responded after having been caught.
Yes.
Okay. How David responded even after the consequence took place. See, David accepted the consequence. That's key.
Yeah.
Because that speaks to David's mentality. That speaks to David's mindset. Okay. Yeah, he made a mistake, right? But when the baby died, because before the baby died, David was in sackcloth. He was in mourning. Okay, he wouldn't eat, he wouldn't drink, he wouldn't wash his face, he wouldn't do anything. It was almost like he was just a zombie. Yeah. Right? They couldn't get him to do anything. Right?
Yeah. Well, he had a lot of stuff going on. He had a lot of stuff went on in his house.
But the scripture says that once David heard, when they came and they told David that baby died, because David was hoping that the child was going to live. That's why he was in mourning. He was hoping. Okay. However, when it was brought to David's attention what the consequence was and that the baby had died, what did David do? It says that David immediately got up and washed his face and started to eat. David accepted the consequence. And see, again, we're talking about a mindset here. Okay? When you're addressing something, you have to address it at the root.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
David was a man after God's own heart, because in David's heart, God, he honored God. Yeah. Even with his mistakes. Okay. Now here comes Saul. Here's the difference with Saul. Okay.
Saul did what Adam did.
Saul blames people. Well, yeah, that's exactly what he did, because Adam blamed his wife. Well, that's that woman you gave me. Well, actually, he blamed God.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
He
was that
blamed
woman
the
you.
woman, but really he blamed God, because the way he
one-
worded it was,
the
it's that woman you gave me.
Yeah.
Okay. So he didn't take responsibility. So we like you just brought in, Adam did not take responsibility.
Mhm.
Okay. Saul didn't take responsibility. Okay. When Samuel brought it to his attention, what's this with the bleeding of the sheep? And then here comes all the excuses, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes further. You know, after saying he did everything he was supposed to do, then he says, "Well, it was the people." He says, "The people scattered from me." He says, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but those of you who have read it are familiar with it. What Saul says is that he forced himself. In other words, in order to force yourself to do something, and this is where compromise comes in. In order to force yourself to do something, that means you already knew better.
Yes.
You already knew what the standard was, but you went against it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to look at the motivation. Now you're talking about a mindset.
Yeah.
What motivated you to go against the standard? Okay.
Yeah.
So then one can ask this question: was God ever first in Saul's life?
Mm-mm.
You see, because you can ask those questions just based on how Saul moved.
Yeah.
Based on how David moved, based on how Saul moved, that was the difference between the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I want to add because because I have a lot of these conversations with a lot of people. Now, one thing that I always, because I always look at right is right and wrong is wrong,
right.
and the story has to be told
right.
so everybody can get a full understanding of it.
Right.
So when I look at the story of David, and what I always got to think about, okay, after she was pregnant, Bathsheba was pregnant, what was his feeling towards the man that was in his army?
Well, I would say this, and of course this is an opinion. Okay.
Yeah, well, with all this is opinion.
Right. Initially, I think that David tried to write it by trying to get him to sleep with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Was he trying to write it, or was he just trying to cover it?
Well, he was trying to cover it up. He was trying to cover it up because she was pregnant. I mean, you can't hide that.
Yeah. And he didn't want her to be. He didn't want her to be stoned.
If he could have, if there was never a baby in the picture, okay, would David have taken a different approach?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can always ask that question. Okay,
yeah.
There's a baby in the picture. Okay, she's pregnant. Okay, well, we got to do something about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think the husband's name was Uriah. Okay,
Uriah, yeah.
So therefore, David tried to get Uriah to sleep with his wife.
Yeah.
Come home, sleep with his wife. But Uriah was dedicated. Uriah was a man of integrity.
Well, and I'm going to paraphrase some of it. This is just my opinion and my opinion alone. I think the reason why Uriah didn't want to go sleep with his wife, I think that as him because you got to think about that, he was in a war. Mm-hmm. So him and his battle buddies are probably sitting around the campfire and they're talking about how they wanted to go home to their wives and probably all that. Mm-hmm. And so when he got summoned to leave, he probably felt a sense of guilt.
That's what I said. He was a man of integrity.
Yes. I'm saying, I want everybody to understand that that's probably what he was feeling. So therefore, that's why he didn't want to go sleep with his wife.
Man, they can't go. I'm not going to go. Right. So he's like, no, I'm gonna follow this thing through to the end.
Yes.
So then David realized he couldn't get Uriah to do what he wanted him to do. Mm-hmm. Put him on the front line. Okay. Yeah. So that he would get killed immediately.
And to me, that was kind of like the same thing Cassius Pilate did. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, if he dies, the blood ain't on my hands.
When he washed his hands, right? The blood ain't on my hands.
And that's what kind of seemed that
after he had given over to the people. Though.
Yes.
So again, he was in a position of power to make a decision.
Yeah.
And instead of making the decision that he was supposed to make, being in the position of power that he was in,
Mm-hmm.
he tried to shift that responsibility to the people.
Yes.
But it was never on the people. It was the power was his.
Yes. Yeah.
But because he was afraid of what the result would be, when the others found out that he made such a decision, he said, "Oh, no, I'm gonna put it on the people. Okay, so I can still stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and not be looked at as a traitor, right?
Yeah.
And blame it on the people. Well, no, this is what the people chose. So, and that's the same thing Saul tried to do. Saul did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hey, people scattering from me. You weren't here, you weren't here. The people were scattering from me. This is what the people wanted. So therefore, I forced myself to give a sacrifice. Okay. But at the end of the day, the responsibility was his. Yes. Okay. At the end of the day, when it came down to a baby that came out of the relationship between David and Bathsheba, the responsibility was theirs. Yes. Okay. Nobody else's but theirs. So they had to suffer that consequence. But oftentimes, what do people do when they find out that they've been caught? They start paying people off. They start, matter of fact, sometimes they kill people. Yeah. Yeah. To quiet them up, just like David did. Mm-hmm. Okay, David had Uriah killed to quiet him up because he didn't want the story told. Yeah. Okay, yeah. He didn't want to get out that this man that came home, he had been in war the whole time. He ain't slept with his wife. How she get pregnant? So that means she committed adultery. And then as soon as she got killed, he married her immediately. Married her immediately to right the wrong. Mm-hmm. And then as I always have to ask the question, what was his feelings after he got wind back that he was dead? Mm-hmm. That's the important part too. Mm-hmm. So could I just be like, if I want to set you up, right? And then all of a sudden it did work out, and someone brought it back to my attention, right? And I'm like, oh, cool. Now I can move on. I could take his block. I could take his property. I could take his stuff over there. Take his wife. It was. And then all of a sudden, here come the courts. It was a manipulation of the law. Yes. Okay? Power. Law stated that if you commit adultery, you have to be stoned to death. Okay. But law also stated that if the husband died, then the wife was free to marry again. Yeah. Okay. When it was supposed to be, and everything, it was supposed to be the first kinsman. So yeah. At this point, no one knew. It doesn't say that everybody knew that Bathsheba was pregnant. It didn't say that. No. Okay. So he hid it. So he hid that. They hid that. So he hurried up and got married. That way, I said, okay, here's the first way we're gonna try is this. First way we're gonna try is to get him to sleep with his wife. Man, couldn't get that to happen. Okay, kill him off. Now I'm going to marry her, right? She's pregnant, so I'm going to marry her, and then it's going to look as if it was our child, but legal because we were married when it took place. But God still held him accountable. Yes, he did. Because why? That's the key point. God's omnipresent. He's omniscient, knows everything, and he's everywhere at all times. So therefore, you could probably hide that from the people, but you could not hide that from God. If that makes sense. Yes. And and that was the important part, that he did. His house was, remember he was on the ground, welling around on the ground. Samuel told him, why is thy king welling around on the ground? What he said, like a pig. What he said, again, throwing dirt on himself, repenting. He said, he said, the God forgave you the first time you asked. So, but he said, but your sins will not go unpunished. So his whole house went in a whole shamble. His brother raped his sister. Then his other brother killed him for raping his sister. Then the other brother his son turned around, wanted to kill him and take his throne. So it was just a whole mess from that one little sin. Turned everything upside down. Turned everything upside down, and there's a great lesson to be learned for us leaders, when we in these predicament. Think about what David did, and look, he didn't escape the penalty. The consequence, the penalty was there.
It always was. It remained on. It fell upon them.
Mhm.
So as we talk about leadership, we have to understand. Yeah, you can do things in the dark.
But they're gonna be brought to the light.
It's going to be brought to the light someday.
Right.
Look at all what P Diddy and them going through. All these entertainers who got a position of power, position of influence, who able to pay people off, and able to change people's lives if they use their gifts and talent properly. But since they use their gifts and talent in an incorrect way, look what happened. Now you got these men coming down, and these men got billions of dollars.
Right.
And this is what we call poor leadership.
Right.
You know, and we see a lot of that going on in our communities too often. Mm-hmm. And it's sad because there's people will take bribes, knowing that it's going to affect the whole community.
Right.
And knowing that it just don't affect just one individual, it's affecting us all. And we don't have a sense of urgency to right them wrongs. We don't take the accountability, responsibility until we get caught. That's why I looked at the David story as some of us, because as long as it's good and it's good for us at the moment, we don't care until we get caught. And then that's when we want to repent. That's when we want to fall to our knees. That's when we want to do this. But look how many people we can destroy in the process. And then by the time you heal and get yourself together, you destroy the whole family, a whole community, a whole neighborhood. You destroy that just in that faction. So we got to be cognizant of what we do. David's story was an important story for us all to learn. Saul's story is an important story to learn. Solomon's story is an important story to learn, because even if you don't believe in the Bible, because I hear people say, "Oh man, I don't believe in it." You don't want to talk about it. I said, even if you don't want to believe, you can still take these stories and learn something from them. You can apply it to your daily life. You can apply it to your mission statement. You can apply it to the way of life. You can apply it to how you consider getting into a position. You can even if you're a husband, those qualities over there as a man reflects as you being a husband too. Because if you make a bad choice in your home, it affects your whole household. Everything, your children, your kids.
If a man decides to get mad at work with his job, now your whole family gonna go without. Your whole family's not gonna be able to eat because you decided to get your emotions and quit your job.
Yes.
I mean that's just one example. A man decides to go out and get drunk and come home and abuse his wife. Okay. So now what has happened? What has happened now is that not only does that decision affect his relationship with his wife, but it also affects his relationship with his kids.
Yes.
So it's just like, any decision that you make as a leader does not just affect the leader. It affects the house.
Yes.
It affects any and everybody that's attached to that leader. And so you have to think beyond just yourself, and remember that as a leader, more often than not, you're representing the people. If you're a man in your house, you're the head of your house. You're representing your family. You're the face of the family. Okay. If you're a boss on the job, okay, you're representing an organization.
Yes.
If you're a president, you're representing the country. I mean, these are the things that, because it's never just about you. Even as a citizen in a community, that means you are a part of the community. Mm-hmm. And if you are a part of a whole. And the things that you do in the community affects the entire community.
Mm. Yeah.
You can't think this just about you. It's only affecting you. No. When you step outside your house, when you do whatever you do inside your house, affects your house, but then eventually pours out to the community because of the trauma and experiences and all those kind of things. You know, you talking about nature versus nurture and all that stuff. But anyway, that stuff spills out to the community. But when you do what you actually do in the community affects the entire community.
Yes.
If you decide to drink and drive, you're affecting the entire community. You decide to rob, you're affecting the entire community. You decide to steal a car, you're affecting the entire community.
Yes.
You're involving the community. So these are all things that can be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Saul was a king, and the decisions that he made as a king, even though he tried to blame the people, affected the people because he was the leader, leading the people. So when you have a bad leader misrepresenting misrepresenting his position, then not only is he affected, not only is his leadership role is affected, but the people who are listening to him are affected as well.
Yes, indeed.
So that's just a part to add in there.
Mm-hmm. And that is that is important that we understand that we don't judge people according to their mistakes. We can't judge people because these leaders in the Bibles were just showing you that they were human beings and they did make their mistakes. And someone was able to redeem themselves and some of them never did.
David redeemed himself.
David redeemed. I think Saul did.
Saul got replaced.
And Solomon didn't. I don't know what happened to Solomon because it doesn't really go. It is in the books of Solomon.
Mm-hmm. Solomon died.
Yeah.
Solomon did die. The kingdom was divided.
They took it from him and gave it to his helpmate. Remember?
Yeah. But see, and that's another thing that stands out is that under David, the kingdoms were united.
Yes.
And after Saul, and the scripture says that the kingdoms were divided, the north and the south. The north being Israel, and the south being Judah.
Yes.
So,
because there's two tribes that stayed together.
10 tribes up north, 2 tribes down below.
Yes.
So yeah, 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, and then all the other tribes were up north.
Yeah.
So those tribes but the tribes were divided because of Solomon's sins, because of Solomon marrying all those women, serving all them false gods, all them idols.
Yeah, building temples for him.
Even though David told him before he died, David schooled his son before he died.
Yeah.
He said, "Though I go the way of all the earth," he told him about the importance of serving God and God alone, and keeping God's commandments.
And he was wise enough to know that too, because God gave him that wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom. But that wisdom went to his head. That power went to his head. But he didn't start off that way. Just like Saul.
Didn't
Saul didn't start off that way. And Solomon didn't start off that way either.
And David didn't start off that way either.
Because initially, but David really didn't end that way either.
No.
David made a mistake. David faced his mistake.
After he got caught out.
After he got caught out.
Yeah, I want to put that in there because I got to add that in there.
Other people get called out, they still don't face their mistake.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
Yeah.
It's like Friday. That wasn't me on video.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, but
but you're on video. Oh no, that must be somebody else wearing a red hat. That wasn't me. You wearing the same red hat right now, telling me it wasn't. But those are the facts.
Yes.
But Solomon, when he started off, it said that Solomon prayed and he asked, he says, "Lord, I just want to know how to go in and out amongst your people." Okay?
Yeah.
And the Lord was so pleased with Solomon. He said, "Look, you didn't ask me for long life, you didn't ask me for riches, you didn't ask me for life for your enemies. You asked that my will be done. How to go in and out amongst my people." He said, "Not only am I going to bless you with what you asked me for, but I'm blessed with the other stuff too."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Solomon was the wisest of the wise. there was no one else as wise beyond Solomon.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're right.
but Solomon, with everything that God gave him, he took it and he changed and
Yeah,
became somebody different. That's what happens to
because
so many people in powerful positions.
Solomon started looking for the pleasures in life, and that's where
What could he not have? What could he not buy?
yes, and that's what a lot of our leaders do. They look for the monetary gain, and so they get distorted. Everything their views get distorted. Their moral compass gets.
They said there are three things that kill a leader: money, power, and women.
Wow.
Okay, money, power, and women.
Mm.
Okay. Now
most
look at a lot of our athletes. What's in kill them? Money,
power,
and women.
Yeah.
And most often they find themselves with that women are the worst
Yes.
for them because they feel that
Because the money is all everything is just for the woman.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the woman is the
problem.
Yeah.
They love the money because they know the money gets the women.
Get the women. Yeah.
Why they love the money. If the money didn't draw the women, they wouldn't care about the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But because they know the money draws the women, they love the money. And they want to get as much money as they possibly can,
mm-hmm.
more than anybody else, so they can always use it as a power play.
And the sad part is, and our women today are money hungry, where they can't. They're not happy. They're not success. They're not. Their appetite is never fulfilled. They always constantly thinking that there's something better. So they get with this guy with money. They go for the guy who got more money, or more fame, or more power. And it's a really ugly cycle that we're dealing with in our community. That's why a lot of men want to get into powerful positions, leadership positions, because they know that's going to bring women too. And some of them do it because they want the material things, or the material things is always about the women. Everything's about the women. And a woman dresses and do all the stuff to herself to get the men with power and money. Mm-hmm. So it's an ugly cycle from both sides of the spectrum.
But what they don't realize, both men and women, the man who has power, money, whatever, and gets a woman, what he can never get, he can never buy integrity.
Nope.
You can never buy loyalty. You can never buy commitment. If their goal or their motivation is not the person and what that person, who that person is, and if their motivation is not them, but their motivation is monetary, then of course they're going to swing from vine to vine, just like you just described.
Mm-hmm.
They'll swing from vine to vine. Oh, yep, you're going to make so much money. This is making more money. Well, no, you're only making so much money. This is making more money. They're going to keep swinging from vine to vine because that's their motivation. Their focus is the money. It's not the person.
Yes, exactly.
But when the focus is the person and it's not the money, okay, now you got loyalty. Now you have commitment. Okay, because in that regard, when someone's into you, it doesn't matter how much money you make or how much money you don't make.
Mm-hmm.
You can be up here today and down here tomorrow, and they'll still be with you.
Yes.
Because for them, it was never about the money. Mm-hmm. But if it was only about the money, if you were here, they're with you. But as soon as you're down here, they leave you because it was about the money.
Yes.
And those are the kind of things that, those are the kind of things that money can't buy. When they say money can't buy love, money can't buy love. That's really what it's talking about. Mm-hmm. Money can't buy those things. Those kind of things, either a person has them or they don't.
Yeah. And
we have to do a better job. Women have to do a better job at looking for the right characteristics, character in men. Men have to do a better job doing the same thing towards women. I'm a firm believer, and I've said this before, how could two walk together unless they agree? It's that same thing. It's that same philosophy. It's that same mental attitude. But when you separate, when you pull a Saul when the Lord has already told you, okay, don't give your sons to their daughters, don't give your daughters to their sons because they're going to turn your heart away from me, right? So when you've already compromised, you've turned away from God, okay, and you're chasing everything that's opposite of God. So you're like, hey, I don't believe in God. I don't, I used to believe in God. I used to be a believer, but now I'm not a believer, or I'm not a believer. Then do understand you get what the world has to offer you. That is apart from God.
Yeah.
Okay, because God is what brings in that goodness. He's the one that brings in that talks about not committing adultery, not committing fornication, and not lying, stealing, cheating, murder, and all that. You hear all you see all that. Oh, you get all that with God. Okay, you go apart from that. Now you have what the world has to offer. The world offers murder. The world cheats. The world steals. The world is full of bad pride. The world is not humble. The world is dog eat dog. Yeah. Okay, that's the world. So if you're choosing that, then you get everything that comes with that. So then when you find a woman in the club, you say, well, I'm about to clean her up and make her a housewife. She don't want to be no housewife. She's in the club. Yeah. She loves being in the club. She's like, hey, you met me in the club.
She's for the streets.
Yeah, she's from the street. She want to be in the street. Okay.
Same with a man.
That's right. You find a man that's in the street. He loves being in the street. You're gonna try and clean him up and tell him now y'all together. He can't be out in the street no more. Okay. I mean that's.
It might still do him for a little while, but then
right. It might say, well, I'll stay home for a little bit, and after that, what you would see.
The true nature is gonna kick in.
The true person is gonna show up. And you're gonna be like, wait a minute, you told me you were done with the street. Yeah, I told you that, but it's just like a politician. Yeah, I told you that before you voted me in. But I was trying to get something. I was trying to get your vote. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I did it. I told you what I was gonna do because I was trying to get whatever I was trying to get from you as a woman. You get my point. Keep it PG. So, but now that I got it, now that I locked you in, now that I locked you down, okay, now I'm gonna be who I'm gonna be. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the woman does the same thing. Yep. Vice versa. Yep. So those kind of relationships don't work. Yeah. Because they're based on lies.
And deception. Yeah.
And deception.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's the same thing when you talk about politicians, when you talk about people in leadership roles. It also applies to relationships. Yeah. It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
So you really have to decide or make a determination who you are, and then find somebody who's like you. When you vote, okay, you need to pay particular attention to who they are, and then cast your vote to determine what you support, what you don't support. But when you find yourself bending and saying, well, I know this, but it's not a big deal. That's what Saul did. Saul said it's not a big deal. Lord, I know you said it was all bad, but you know what? We kept the best of this, kept the best of that, kept the best of that. Okay? You grab yourself a man or a woman from the street. And he says, well, they got this good quality. I know they like to sleep around, but they got this good quality. I'll work that out of them. No, that's who they are. Okay? That's who they're choosing to be. You got to let that be. Okay? Yeah. You don't want to marry. You should not marry a person like that if that's not what you want. Okay? Whether it be a man, whether it be a woman looking for a man, I would say to a woman looking for a man, be careful who you submit yourself to. Okay, don't say I do to the first thing that comes along and smile in your face, because he may not be a good man. This might be this man may not believe in working. Yeah. Okay, so why would you want one of them? that a man that doesn't want to work. I'm not talking about somebody who's having a hard time finding a job. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but I'm saying that somebody who does not want to work, who wants to be taken care of. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's not what you're looking for. Don't grab one of them. Or an abusive man, or an abusive man. Yeah. Or insecure man or insecure woman. Right. If narcissists. While you're dating, they're following you around everywhere you go. You can't go nowhere. You can't breathe. They're suffocating you now. Do understand that if you get married, it's gonna be worse. Yeah. So it's like these are things that you got to pay particular attention to. If you feel like you got to watch, but then there's a flip side to that as well. If you feel like you got to watch somebody all the time, they're not worth having anyway. Yeah, pretty much. Go and get rid of them because you got to watch them all the time. Where we at? 3.
Yep.
Choose humility over pride and ego. David chose humility over humility. Is that what's supposed to be?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
David chose humility over. Oh, that's something else. What's that supposed to be?
Hubris. That's what hubris means is he chose humility over pride.
Okay. Over bad pride.
Over bad pride, basically. So he could have kept his pride.
Yeah.
He could have said, well, you know, when when Nathan gave him the spiel, he could have said, well, that ain't me.
Never mind. Yeah.
It wasn't me. He admitted it right away.
Right.
Because, you know,
he knew it was him.
He knew it was him. And the thing is, he even cast a sentence on himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said that man should be murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't say the woman. No. He said the man.
Yeah.
So he even cast a sentence on himself.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one thing a lot of people don't.
Lord have mercy. Let's go to 4.
Yeah.
Be careful with our words and others' hearts. We were just talking about that.
Yep.
David prayed in Psalm 19 and 14, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So you see here
where he's repenting.
Yeah, he's repenting.
And he repented because he knew he did wrong, and he wants to reconcile that wrong. And a lot of leaders and a lot of our folks don't do that. We try to get more flashy things and more money to cover up a wrong.
Right.
And we try to hide behind. We use money and our material things as scapegoats.
Right.
You know, or a position.
Right.
So we got to be careful with these leaders, man. These leaders, you know, like I said, these leaders are. It's really important to understand leaders and understand leadership roles and what leaders bring to the table. Mm-hmm. Leaders make more leaders.
You know, I mean, the biggest thing is that we've talked about this before. The biggest part of this, is responsibility. Understand that being a leader, big responsibility comes with being a leader.
It does.
It's you know, it's almost something like being your brother's keeper.
Mm-hmm.
It's responsibility. You know, real leaders understand that their true job is to serve, not to be served.
Yes.
That's really the job of a leader.
Yes.
Is to serve. In other words, you know, as you're serving, whether you're some people believe in pushing from behind, some people believe in pulling from the front.
Yes.
I personally believe, my opinion is being in the front is better because you're leaving a trail for others to follow.
Yeah.
You know, I can't remember what president it was that talked about how he used the analogy of a string, and it said, you know, he said leadership is like leadership in the military is like this string. He said, well, if you push it from behind, all it does is it crinkles up on itself. He said, but if you pull it from the front, it stays in a straight line. So, and I'm a firm believer that, I don't know if it's or I can't remember what it was, but anyway, that I'm a firm believer that leaders lead from the front. They show you how things are to be done. I mean, unfortunately, Saul didn't do what he was supposed to do. Neither did Solomon. Mm-hmm. Okay. David made mistakes. Okay. David did recover, but David made mistakes too. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And basically it showed us that two leaders didn't recover from their mistakes, and one did.
And why did that? And now, so here's the question: why did that leader recover from his mistakes? Well, what was his attitude in comparison to the other two's attitude?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to, and we have to ask ourselves when we're talking about leaders, what's the attitude?
Yes.
When you're able to bring something to their attention,
right,
that's instrumental to their potential growth are they receptive to hear?
And that's the big thing. Because see, all three of these, if you pay close attention, all of them made mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, no leader other than one, and that was Jesus himself, is perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
so with that being said, leaders are going to make mistakes.
Yes.
And it's not about the mistakes that they make. It's about how they recover from those mistakes.
Yeah, and there was leaders that were still great and wasn't able to go into the promised land. Remember, Moses wasn't even able to go into the promised land, but he was a great leader. Yeah. He led his people out, and there were some hiccups because the people were stubborn and stiff-necked and disobedient. And he got upset because of their ignorance.
Moses made a decision.
Yeah, but he was upset with their ignorance because they made promises that they wasn't keeping.
Well, he was upset with them, but you have to think about what he said. He says, "Do I need to draw water out of this rock?" And he struck the rock after the Lord had told him to speak to it.
Yes.
So, in other words,
he did what he wanted to do.
He did exactly what Saul did. Okay.
Yeah.
Saul allowed himself to be led into sin by the desires of the people. Okay. And Moses allowed himself to be drawn into sin by his anger with the people. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the thing to always remember as a leader is that as leaders, we have to maintain the standard regardless of what comes our way. And that's not easy to do. That is not easy to do. Okay. Whether you're a mother, whether you're a father, whether you're a boss, or whether you're a police officer, whether you're a judge or whatever, president or congressman, senator, whatever, a CEO of a company, a vice president, president, you have responsibilities.
Yes.
You're a coach. You have responsibility. You're an administrator at a school. You have responsibilities. Your job is to teach. Your job is to lead. Your job is to set an example. We talk about community leaders. Your job, again, is to serve the community. And what I mean by serving community, it's not just a matter of being out on the corner and passing out flyers or showing up and doing this, that. No, it's what your lifestyle is. That's serving the community.
Yeah.
Okay, just because you're out there handing out chicken dinners, this and the other, or handing out free this, free that, but yet you're a problem in the community, just like you're saying that there's a community and you're contributing to that problem. You know better. I don't care how much free money you hand out, how much free food you hand out, how many basketball games you attend. If your life doesn't speak to what it is that you say you represent, then you're worse.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and we got a lot, and we deal with that constantly within our families, community, organizations. We got a lot of people. Like I always say, certain people shouldn't be in leadership positions, but they are in them, and it's more people in leadership positions that shouldn't be in than those who should be in. A lot of people don't want to take the responsibility. Nobody wants to babysit anymore because it's hard being out there in the forefront trying to corral and get people back on fold. That's a strong shepherd. You have to be a strong shepherd because your sheep is always. Oh man, they're gonna always try to wander off. They're always doing something. And so you have to have a real thick skin, and you have to be really prayed up when you're dealing with a lot of people, because a lot of people got a lot of demons in them. They got a lot of things going on inside of them that causes what you're really fighting against. Because we're not fighting just flesh and blood. We know what we're fighting against. So we got those around us all day, and sometimes just because you see them at work or see them at church, you see them at school. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. What's going on inside of them at home or in a private life. You don't know what they're going through. And you might think you're talking to a sane individual. That person's insane like a mud. And you would never find that out until it triggers to a point where that person does serious harm. You think a lot of these kids are able to go out and just kill people for no reason? Why do you think they're able to kill and don't have no remorse in killing? They can write it in song. They can write a song and tell you verbatim how they was gonna kill a person or how they did it and why they was gonna do it. Or he just dissed me on the song. So his life should be taken because he dissed me on the song. He made a track talking about me. I'm like, but these are people that other kids are looking up to. These are the kids that people are looking up to. These are the leaders, and they don't even know that they're leaders. Because once you got a following, you are considered a leader. No matter if you was ordained to be a leader or not. I remember Mike Tyson had said something once before. Mike Tyson said he was, I think he said he was 15 years old or 16 years old. He was 15 and 14 years old. I can't remember if it was 15. I got to look it up again. He said they was telling him that he was a role model. He said he was only 15. I think he said he was 15 or 16 years old. And he said they raising his hand up saying you're the number one champ of the world, and you're a role model. He said, man, I don't want to be a role model to nobody because I'm not a role model to myself. Now, at least he was honest. He said, I'm not a role model to myself. He said, how can I be a role model to these kids? I just know how to fight, and I like to fight. Just because I like to fight and I know how to fight, and I won the world championship. I mean, I'm the world's best boxer right now. That don't mean I want to be a role model. But the reality of hindsight 2020, you're going to be a role model, regardless if you want to be or not. Now he gets that now as he older, but when he was young, he didn't get that. He didn't want that responsibility. He said that was too much of a burden. That was too much of a burden because he couldn't be. He couldn't fathom himself being a leader at that time. He was still trying to grow and find himself. He said he was just in a club he said he was just in the alleys robbing people, knocking people out. He said now he raising his hand and said, you're the number one champion of the world. Now they're saying you got to be a role model. So I understood what he meant when he said that, and that's what kind of leaders you might have in place who are forced in leadership positions, but really knowing that they don't want to be in a position. But they like the accolades. They like the pull they got.
Motivation. They're not motivated by the role in of itself.
Yes.
As a role model.
Yes.
They're motivated by the money. They're motivated by the status.
Yes.
Not everybody's motivated by the same thing.
Yes.
And so you have to take a real close look at people with the things that people are motivated by. That's what I was saying earlier about relationship.
Mm-hmm.
When you decide to be with somebody, you want to know what their motivations are. You want to know why are they motivated to be in a relationship with you?
Mm-hmm.
If it's for money, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
If it's
yes.
If it's for stuff, get rid of them. Because the thing is that one day you may wake up, you may not have the stuff, you may not have the money. You may wake up one day, maybe you get into a car accident. You don't look the same way. That doesn't change who you are as a person on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if a person doesn't see you for who you truly are, they're motivated by other things. At any day, that those things can change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And their loyalties go with those things.
Yeah, and so, look how many rich men who was able to get every woman they want, and they liked the one particular woman, and she dogged him out and took all her money, took all his money, left him for his best friend or left him for another guy with more money. And this guy got a lot of money, he got a lot of women, but he's in love with that one. And he ended up going to go kill her. Remember that Falcon dude from Atlanta Falcon? He killed his wife. She got pregnant or something like that. There's a whole bunch of entertainers killed. They got money. They got women. They can go all over the world and go to Brazil. They can go to countries and get beautiful women, and
But you can't buy the loyalty. They don't get the loyalty.
you don't get the loyalty. You know what I mean?
Like look, it's not the face. It's never the face. It's the loyalty that you want.
Yes.
It's and I think this is PG enough to say, it's not the sex.
Yes.
It's the submission that you want.
Yes.
That's what makes it special. When two people submit to one another, you have a love affair. When you have one that refuses to submit, you don't have a love affair.
Mm-mm.
You got one that's enjoying it for whatever reason. Everybody's motivated by different things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when two people really love each other and they love everything they love. They love the smell of your hair, they love the sound of your voice, they love your laugh, they love the joke that you tell, that those are all characteristics, right?
Yeah.
But when a person only likes one thing about you, and that one thing about you changes, maybe they liked you because you were popular in high school.
Mm.
And then once high school was done, they didn't want to be with you no more because you're no longer a job or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe they liked you because you played football or you were a pro basketball player or whatever the case may be.
Your parents had a lot of money, and now all of a sudden you moved out. Now you don't got no money.
You don't have no money. So now they don't want to be with you. It's like you gotta look at those things.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta pay closer attention to those things. Those are the things. Those are the tell-alls.
Yes.
Those are the indicators right there that tell you where a person's motivation lies and what they're about and what they're not about.
Mm.
When you sit there and you watch TV about your candidate or whoever you're gonna vote for, you're trying to listen and learn and hear what they're saying, what other people are saying about them. But really, more so, you want to listen to what they're saying.
Yes.
Not someone's opinion about them, but what they're saying, what you hear for yourself, so that you can come to your own informed conclusions.
Mm.
And in relationships, it's the same thing. When you're in a leadership role, know what the job is. When people say, "Hey, I want to hire you to do this," wait a minute now. I'll pay you this much. Hey, whoa! Before we even start talking about how much pay it is, now pay is important. But before we start talking about how I pay, what are you asking me to do?
Yeah. What are you asking me to do?
What are you asking me to do? Because I may not want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? Now, unless your integrity is for sale. Now we know that Esau had that problem. Esau sold his birthright because for his stomach.
Yeah.
And I just bring that up just to say that there are people who sell who they are. There are people who are for sale.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to deal with somebody who's for sale, especially in a relationship.
And then you got to be careful what on the type of leader style that you have, because you can make jealous brothers. You can make brothers jealous of you and throw you in a ditch and sell you off, like Joseph. So you have to be careful on how you present certain things and how you do certain things around certain people, because people would try to kill you just because of the stature you have and the relationship favoritism or they feel or whatever you have with other people. So you got to be careful when we talk about this. When we say, because these are all leadership styles. This is all about leadership. And when you look at leadership, you look at it different roles. Like Joseph had a leadership role. Yeah. He was a servant first. He got a little cocky with his brothers, because he knew he was a favorite of his dad. He just kind of threw little stuff. It wasn't like, I don't think
Joseph didn't know, but Joseph was young.
He was young.
He was a child.
And his brothers just was jealous of him.
Right. And Joseph didn't do nothing but communicate his dreams.
Yes.
And they had an issue with his dreams.
Well, they had an issue because
he was favored.
That's what it was.
His dad's favorite.
Yes.
And he was having his dreams.
Yes. And making himself be higher than them.
And they started making fun of them. Oh, here comes his dreamer.
Yeah.
But they had an issue because he was his dad's favorite. That was the biggest part of it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You can't help if someone takes a liking to you. You can't help. You can't control that. People are motivated by things because they're just more. For everybody is different.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this: as a leader, you want to be mindful of your circle.
Yes.
As a leader, of the other leaders you have around you. Don't let everybody ride your bus.
Yes.
Okay. Not everybody's a good leader.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes just because people got money doesn't mean they're good leaders. So
And
they
you
may
don't,
they may be they may be invest in your vision, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you ought to have them on the bus. If that makes
and
sense.
quit putting around you yes men.
Yes.
You know
Don't wanna be- yes.
no leader should want to have a bunch of yes men's around you.
Because you'll never progress.
Yes,
There will be no fresh ideas. When
exactly,
you spit about yes man, you'll never be able to reap the benefits of fresh ideas. When people
exactly.
challenge you, then what that does is it forces you to think. It forces everybody to think.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're thinking, you get so far away from the status quo
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly developing new ideas because
Yes.
you're not surrounded by yes men.
Mm-hmm.
When you're surrounded by yes men, you stay in the status quo. So then when the times change, you don't change with the times.
Yeah.
So what happens? You fall behind.
Yes.
And you fall behind not because you were incapable of changing with the times, but because you allowed yourself to be surrounded by yes men who didn't stay up with the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, those are things again you have to be mindful of. What part of being a good leader?
Yes.
Is having people who are going to respect you,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time challenge you.
Yes.
But challenge you in a respectful way.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to be critiqued. Every leader got to be. Sometimes you have to be critiqued. You ain't gonna make all the best decisions, and some decision that you make is not gonna always be productive for the collective. Sometimes you got to make hard decisions that's going to be against. It's gonna go against the status quo. But you have to be able to stand in the face of diversity. You got to be able to stand on that. If you make the decision, you stand on it. That's where your accountability and responsibility stands, and that's what people respect. Okay, at least he stood on it. The reason why I can respect Trump on a lot of things because he's standing on what he do. Even though he could be he ain't the best, but he's standing on certain things that that he can stand on. And I'm not saying he's the best candidate candidate we have, but
President now.
period.
He's not candidate anymore.
I mean he's gonna be president tomorrow. So we got we ain't had no great president our whole entire lifestyle anyway. They all have their own issues, their own hiccups. I call
them. Or character flaws.
Yeah, every last one of them. So we gonna face whatever we supposed to face in these trying times. But if we learn what we're talking about right now, what we're looking for in a leader, and we learn from past leaders' mistakes, we'll learn to pick better people we put in place. So this is what this is about. Us learning to pick better people to put them in place. Check for those characteristics. Look for certain things. You need to be. Pay more attention to. Don't listen to sound bites all the time. Follow the action. Look at the action, what they did before in their past, to lay them to their future. Because you're going to start to see some hiccups in there. You're going to see their mindset, and a lot of them change. Mindsets do change. Don't get it wrong. People can change. But you got to figure out how that change is good and beneficial for you. If you're going to put them in over you or as looking at selecting them as your leader. Because they might not be for you. They can change for whatever money, whatever they can change for. I remember we used to have certain guys that get around us and we be kicking it. And then next, they see a girl, he immediately start turning on you, start talking about you in front of the girl, or just try to give you some money in front of her. Cause like you go into the club and you like, hey, I ain't got that much money, got $5. Oh, I got you, man. But he only want to pull it out when he's around a bunch of girls and give you the money. People should do that all the time. You know what I mean? Kind of bust you out.
They want to one up.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And you follow those type of guys.
Right.
That's
your circle.
Yep.
So again, you gotta be wise. You gotta consider your circle.
You really consider about your circle. Mm-hmm. What was the next one we had? What was it on 5 or 6? I think it was 6 or 5. It might have been 5.
6. Poor leadership leads to poor outcomes. Poor leadership can lead to poor outcomes. Yeah, that's what we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
We just covered that one already.
Yep.
Then number 7, poor parenting affects innocent children. Talked about that earlier.
Yep.
Number 8, hypocrisy can lead to our downfall. We actually talked about that too.
Yeah.
We talked about all of these.
Yeah.
And turning away from the Most High, like Solomon did, will lead us to a downfall where we stop believing and trusting in the faith of our leaders. Yes. We covered them all.
Yeah, and us, in our community is, I was sitting back and listening to some people. They was talking about, man, I can't wait to watch the Super Bowl, or I can't wait to for the Emmy Awards, or I can't wait for the new Mary J. Blige movie coming out. I'm like, and I'll be like, okay, all the stuff we got going on, and these are the things that we worried about. These are the things we focus on so hard about. We got people, we got a president about to go in office where nobody knows what he's going to do. Everybody's nervous.
Mm-hmm.
But we worried about Mary J. Blige movie coming out. We worried about the Super Bowl. Who's going to be performing in the Super Bowl? We worried about all these distractions. And we don't got a leader to bring us to focus, to bring us back to focus. We ain't had no leader to make us see the reason why we are so far behind. Why we don't have a community. Why we keep allowing other cultures to come in our community and become rich immediately, while we have been poor, while we remain stagnant and poor. We don't look at it. We're so focused on the wrong thing. We're so focused on things that entertain us, we forget about what true leadership is. Because leader is you. The leadership starts within you. There are certain things you got to start saying, okay, I like sports, okay, but at this time and these time and days and hours, there's a lot more that I need to be focusing on that I have to do. I said, because I got to prepare a future for my children. This is what we talk about inheritance. These are what inheritance are, and you want and to inherit your children to be future leaders is a great inheritance. To get them to become the new leaders, effective leaders, compassionate leaders, humanity leaders. I mean, people who really believe in humanity, who believe in civil rights, our rights, our social development. Because right now we're in a state where our social development is really depleting. We don't have no social development. We're so into our phones and stuff. Everybody can sit at the table and everybody's on their phone. Nobody's talking to each other. And the only way you can talk to each other, you send a text to each other, and you're sitting right next to each other. And you sending the text to them. You say, "Hey, can you get me that water?" And you standing right there. Right. Man, I tell you about a guy broke in one of the apartments. Some guys broke in an apartment down one of these apartments, right? So I had to go in there. So I opened, and I went in there. The door was locked and everything. So I'm like, okay, and I go in. So I was going to go retrieve a shop vac because I had water gushing out of the place. So I opened the door and go in, and it was dark in there. And I was going to turn the light on in the kitchen. And I stumbled over something. I heard some, he was running a little bit, right? So I turned the light on. There's 2 guys laying right in the kitchen. They laying right in the kitchen, right by the refrigerator. I'm like, I don't know how they got in there. So I said, hey, man. I said, you ain't supposed to be in here. Oh, so the one guy got up. He's he trying to fix his stuff, fix his thing, wipe his sleep out of his eye. So I said, hey, man, y'all got to go, man. I got the police coming, man. I said, I don't want to call. I had to call the police. Y'all got to go. And he's like, oh. And he gets on the phone and calls a guy laying on the floor. The guy answered the phone. What? He said, what? We got to go, man. I'm sitting there like, oh my God. That's when I realized, man, he called the guy, this guy right here, this guy laying here. He called it, and the guy act like the guy wasn't nowhere around. He's like, where you at? You know, yeah, man, we gotta go, man. I was like, oh man, I was like, I started cracking up, man. I was like, I was mad, but because they scared me. So I'm mad first because I don't know what they're gonna do. So I had, you know, the first thing you do, you put your back against the wall just in case they try to come. You know, I know that you coming, you're going to, you know, you're going to have to, you're going to catch some theories too. So I'm standing on my back against the wall, and I'm telling them they have to get out. And you know, the guy on the phone telling this guy, and this guy arguing with him on the phone. Well, man, you know, man, you told me this place was safe. They arguing on the phone. I was like, wow. And they'll be walking down the street on the phone, still talking to each other, walking together. I was like, wow. I had to take a picture and send it to my regional. I said, man, look at this.
Yeah.
But
those are facts.
you know,
That's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
yeah, man. But you know, you know, like I said, you know, and like I said, you know, we grew up. We didn't really have. We had a lot of leaders. We had a lot of elder men in the community back in the day that you know that we've seen. Now, was they leaders to us? And some, I don't know, Mr. Corbin, you know, Mr. York, Mr. Peoples, you know, we used to all sit down. Remember, we just sit on that stoop and just talk to him.
Well, I had Mr. York at girl instructor
Oh, was he?
in junior high school.
Was it Mr. Peoples or
Mr. York.
or was it Mr. York?
Yeah.
That mean man?
ROTC. He was ROTC.
Oh yeah, he was mean.
He was strict.
Yeah, he had me.
I mean, well, man, I was used to my uncle. That's all. I was used to my uncle. I mean, look,
Yeah.
he was strict too. You know, just like
Yeah.
it's not like I hadn't, you know. So, but I learned something.
Yeah.
And I say it over and over again. I learned so much from my uncle. You know,
Yeah.
Respect. And I learned from Mr. York as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you know, junior high school. I was in that ROTC program,
Mm-hmm.
and he, like you said, he was strict. He held you to a standard. So,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't have a dad there, but the Lord allowed men to cross my path.
Yeah.
That taught me things.
Yeah.
Allowed me to learn things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though they weren't my father. You know, they were teachers. They were leaders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one was my uncle. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, but I didn't live with him. But every time I saw him, I knew what he expected. You know, there was a standard that, you know, of behavior, and he held us to that standard. No, he wasn't perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but I respected the standard.
Yeah.
I respected what he poured into me.
Yeah. He taught us good work ethics.
Yeah, you know,
And he taught us about a man about a word, being your word, be about your word.
Another one the other day. When I was in junior high school, he was the SAC teacher, Mr. Barty.
Oh, Barty, yeah.
I ran into him. I mean, you know, at Walmart, you know, and I thanked him for you know pouring into me, because he was another one that was strict.
Yeah.
You know, but
I remember
he poured into us. I mean, you know, he was big at the time. You know, bodybuilding and all that. You know,
Yeah.
but he held us to a standard. He made you not want to go to SAC.
Yeah, remember he was Macmillan principal, then he went over to North principal. What's his name? Mr. Black principal, the male. He was the principal at North.
Colvin? No.
Mr.
Oh, you talking about Haynes?
Mr. Hanks.
Mr. Haynes.
Remember, he was the principal at Macmillan first. Then he went to North.
Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, he was at Macmillan too.
Really?
Yeah,
By the time I got over to North, he was already there.
Yeah, he left he was at Macmillan.
Okay.
And you know, and
strict.
Yeah, he kicked me out for carrying a knife to school.
Yep, standard. I said, held me to the standard. You know, when I went to North, man, I had Mr. Haynes and Mr. Harvey. They were both strict.
Yeah,
they were both strict. I mean, they ran that school.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean,
with iron fist too.
Respected them both.
Yeah.
You know, because it was a standard that
and it was good to see men.
Yes.
and especially our coach that was
Yes.
that was actually that had a standard that
Yes.
held you to a standard.
Yeah.
Remember when we used to go to Boys Club? Remember Tree,
Yep.
Big Al, and all
Yep.
them?
Yep.
Man, they held us to a
That
standard.
Salvation
Army,
Big
yeah.
Al.
Big
Yep.
Mike, the Scots, and all
Yep.
them.
Yep.
They used to get on us all the time.
Get on us all the time. Then stay out of trouble. Then you get kicked out of Salvation Army for a long time. Man.
Carl Washington, all them guys.
Yep.
We got maybe so many of them. Big
like I said,
Mitchell.
There were people,
Yeah.
but and the thing is that, and with that being said, with that being said, as we sit here, we're naming all these great leaders that we remember from the community. So it wasn't that they weren't leaders, but you know what the beautiful thing is? The beautiful thing is that we chose to take away what the leaders offered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I chose to learn from Mr. Haynes. I chose to learn from Mr. Harvey. I chose to learn from Mr. York. I chose to learn from my uncle. I chose to learn from all these people.
Mm-hmm.
What they had to offer. And I look back and I'm like, and I didn't like it then.
Yeah, nobody
strict, But when I look back, I'm like, wow, but because it's they all poured into me. There was an aspect of all of them that poured something into me,
Yeah, and we can't forget our women leaders, our aunties and our big cousins and great aunties.
I mean, again, there are people who took on a role, but in order for a leader to be a leader, they must have somebody who's willing to follow.
Yes.
And so if you look up and you say, wait a minute, there's no leaders in the community, then I must ask you, are you following?
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, there are people who are willing to lead. I think back, when I was dating this girl in high school, and years later after graduation, I 30 years, 20 years out of school. But anyway, I came across one of my dad's friends, my biological father's friends' wives. I ran into her, and she was a librarian actually at the school when I was attending North.
Really?
And so she told me, she said, and I ran into her. She said, "Hey, are you still with so-and-so?" I'm like, "No, I'm not with so-and-so." And she was like, "Oh yeah, I knew that relationship wouldn't work." And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And this is exactly what she said to me. "You wouldn't have listened." She said, "You wouldn't have listened." And so that was her perception at the time, and I probably wouldn't. At that time when she was telling me, I'm like, "Oh, I would have listened." I mean, years later, I've had so much life experience behind me now. So many different experiences. Of course, I'm at the point now where I say, "Oh yeah, I'd have listened." But back then, I wouldn't have listened. Because in that I was in that mindset. I was so much into this girl at that time.
Yeah.
She probably would have tried to tell me, and I probably would have been mad.
Yeah.
Or even bringing it to my attention.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So again, but that's just an example of sometimes. And when I ask that question, hey, there may have been leaders present or prospective leaders present. Potential leaders, that's a better word I'm looking for. Potential leaders present. But again, for someone to lead, there must be someone to follow. So before you're quick to say that there are no leaders, ask yourself if you've ever been willing to follow. Because in order to be a good leader, you must first be a good follower.
Yes. Yeah.
If that's so.
Yeah.
And matter of fact,
and all leaders, and you got to remember when it comes to leadership styles, there's leaders, real effective leaders, know when to teach, know when to preach, and know when to coach. They when to utilize each individual tactics of the, I call them useful tools. When it's time to coach someone through something, you would know if you got to coach them, or you got to teach them, or you got to preach to them.
Right.
You would know. And those styles come in during certain seasons. Certain seasons in a person's life, you have to teach them. Certain seasons, you might have to preach to them, or you might have to coach them. And once you realize that, like I said, you got to learn and real leaders know how to read the room. That's one thing that most leaders got to do. Effective leaders got to do is learn how to read the room. some leaders get so caught up in themselves that they overlook the room, and they into it themselves. So they just constantly just talking, and thinking they're giving you everything you want, and they forgot they lost. They don't even know they lost you. But they would go around and brag and think that they did you a service, and knowing they mostly hurt you more than they helped you. So, leaders really have to learn to read the room. I always say that, learn to read the room.
And ask for feedback.
Yes.
Ask for feedback. As a leader, ask for feedback. You should want to know how you're affecting people.
Yes.
You should want to know that. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's a learning. It's a lesson learned.
Yeah.
It may hurt. It may sting a little bit, but it's better that you know now so that you can fix it, so that you can grow, than for no one to ever tell you, and you're stunted and you continue to have the same problem with multiple people, and no one ever tells you, you will never be able to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So when someone finally does come and tell you, don't be mad at them for what they told you. Thank them.
Yeah.
Because that may have been the one person who was honest enough to tell you what you needed to hear to help you get to the next level.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. And and we leaders, and like I said, it's not an easy task. We both are leaders, and trying to lead our families, it's not always an easy task. Kids veer off. You can be the greatest parent in the world. Don't beat yourself down, and don't think you ain't a good leader because your kids turn out to be a different way. And sometimes people beat themselves up to the point they beat themselves out of the way. You can't beat yourself out the way. You have to stay relevant, and and a lot of time, I think the reason why we fail as parents too is it's the lack of consistency and the commitment to the task at hand. And a lot of us don't know how to communicate with our children in an effective way. We try, I think I know when I was dealing with my son, and I was trying to use a strict style. I was trying to use a style that was that I thought was going to kind of like I was trying to mimic my grandpa, but what my grandpa had, I don't have. And sometimes we try to mimic someone else's stuff, and we have to realize that that's not for us. That's somebody else's style. And so when I'm dealing with my sons, I had to figure out a way. I had to find a better way to communicate and convey information because they got a mind of their own, and they tell you straight up, "Well, Dad, I'm grown now. I want to figure this thing out." Okay, cool. It pisses you off because it's kind of like they're telling you, hey, "You bugging, get out my face, Dad. I want to figure. I know what I know." And as a parent, you don't want to see your kid go through things because when they going through it, you're going through it. And a lot of times we don't realize that because I be sitting like thinking, dang, did I put my mom through that same scenario? Did I make her always worry about me? Did I and we have to be cognizant of how we deal with our children. Our children are the future, and they're not gonna. You have to stay. You have to pray up. You have to stay prayed up for them, and you also have to constantly chum them. I say chum them. I chum them. My sons. Every time I have a conversation with them, I chum them. I don't preach at them. I just chum them. What I do, I just throw stuff at them and to give them food for thought. And then when they come back around, I say, hey, who was that you thought about that? What'd you think about that? What we was talking about that last time? They'll break it down, and I say, oh, okay, I see you hurt me. Then I leave it alone. And then they'll call me, hey, Dad, I just want to tell you, thanks for that information you gave me. I sat back and processed, or I went through something, and that came back 360-fold. I was like, okay, well, I'm glad you got that information, but it takes some time, and that could be a year later. It could be 5 years later they come back and tell you, oh, you know what I mean? They might ain't got it. It might take them 5 years. You know what I mean? So don't beat yourself up thinking you're a bad parent. And people do that constantly. You know, we think we be like, man, my kids are bad because maybe I did something wrong. No. Man, what was that in the Bible when that one guy was it a guy or a woman when she said, "Is my son crippled because?" Or the crippled guy said, "Am I crippled because of the sins of my parents?"
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And he said, "No." So you can't always think it's because of you why your kids are going through what they're going through. You know, some things are just predestined for them to go through so they can learn for themselves. Now it's up to them to make the choice on get the information to get it. Hopefully they get it right away. Some of them have to bump their head more than once. Because I've seen babies who would touch a hot stove and then turn back around a week later and touch it again. And then you got some who would touch it and won't touch it again. Just depends on the child. You know what I mean? So it just depends on the kids. Some kids are just hard-headed. They just want to keep bumping their head, and some of them will bump their head 10, 20 times. How many people we see going through that, bumping their head? You remember I bumped my head so many times growing up, but
Or sometimes I bump my head every time, and it depends on what it is.
yeah. And everybody bump their heads differently.
It may not be. You may not bump your head several times in the same area.
Yes. Yeah.
I bumped my head in a particular area a few times before I got it right.
Mm-hmm.
Before others, they may only have to bump their head one time.
Yeah.
Or probably didn't bump their head at all. Whatever. Everybody's different. It doesn't make me any worse than them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The key is that the most important thing is that it's not the bumping of the head that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's did you learn?
Yes.
As long as you learn, that's most important. And when you bump your head, because sometimes people gotta learn how to learn. You don't quite get it right away. Someone could try to tell you. Sometimes a person can just tell you outright, hey, don't do this. And it just don't process.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go through it, when you suffer the consequence, then you're like, oh, now it processed. Now I get it. And it's sad that, sometimes it's sad that you had to go that route. But again, if that's the route that you had to take to learn the lesson,
yeah.
As long as you learn the lesson, now some lessons you don't get to bounce back from. So hopefully you don't fall victim to those lessons that you can't bounce back from. And what I mean is those, where there's death involved, those kind of lessons you don't get to come back from. But lessons where you can make a mistake and say, hey, you know what? The consequence sucked, but I learned the lesson. I'm not going to do that anymore. Those kind of lessons. Yeah.
When you said that, it made me think about that one movie, Tyler Perry movie. What was the name of that movie? The lady, it was a rich guy. She was working, she had a husband. Was it not Disappearing Act? Unfaithful. I can't. What is the name of that movie?
Unfaithful.
Is it Unfaithful? It was a Tyler Perry movie, and the girl, she ended up cheating on her husband with this rich guy. This rich guy, her husband was a pharmacist. He was studying to be a pharmacist. So this rich guy was wooing her and everything. So she ended up getting with this rich guy, cheating on her husband with him. Mm-hmm. Then the rich guy ended up giving her AIDS.
I don't remember that. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, he gave her AIDS. Mm-hmm. Her mom was trying to coach her, telling her that you making a bad mistake. You need to get out of the devil's den. You need to do this and that. But she wanted to go out and experience for herself. Mm-hmm. And she went out there and experienced and got with this guy. He gave her AIDS. Mm-hmm. And then she ended up losing everything. Mm-hmm. She's sick, got the virus, lost her husband. Mm-hmm. And I know her hair was cut at the end, so I don't know if that had to do with chemo or whatever she had to go through or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was just sad.
I know which movie you're talking about. Because she was a light skinned,
Yeah, yeah,
black
yeah,
chick.
yeah, yeah.
I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember the name of it.
Was
But
it?
I know which movie you're talking
You
about.
know what I'm talking about?
It finally dawned on me.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen it.
You remember? You remember? She made the mistake,
She made
and
the
that
mistake
mistake
and had to live with it.
had to live with that mistake for the rest of her life.
Yep, because her husband, like I said, was a famous pharmacist. He ended up marrying again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they ended up seeing each other
Yeah.
at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But she, like you said, she had the virus.
Yes,
But,
man.
yeah.
And, and that was sad. That was sad because her mom tried to give her that coach.
Yep.
She tried to coach her.
Listen.
She wouldn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
She was so infatuated with lust.
Right.
And a lot of us do that.
Right.
And this is where when we're talking about poor parenting, poor leadership, poor all that.
Yeah.
These are the steps that we end up taking, and it will cost us everything.
Right.
And so we always got to, so that's what I said. That's why I'm kind of glad what that came at the end. And we brought that in. I just wanted to share that part, so maybe people can see how when you make a decision as a leader, because she was a leader in that home. Mm-hmm. She influenced. She had a good job, and the guy was supposed to be her client. Mm-hmm. It should have stayed the client.
Mm-hmm. Or hand that client off to somebody else if you couldn't handle it.
Yes.
Because there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I can't handle this. It's too hot to handle.
Yes.
It's like you talk about, like you use the analogy of the hot stove. You touch it. If you touch it, and you realize it's hot. Okay, the best thing to do is put some distance between you and that thing. Mm-hmm. It's too hot for you to hold. Yeah. But then if you continue to go back and say, well, I know it's hot the first time I touch it, I'm gonna go back and touch it again. Right? So you make a bad decision. Now at this point, at first it was just you touched it, boom, it was hot. You immediately recognize it. Next time, maybe something hot falls on you. Maybe it's hot grease or boiling water, whatever. Now you got 30-degree burns, all over your body, whatever the case may be, which, because you didn't learn to stay away from the stove. Yes. You didn't learn not to mess around with the stove, so, and I'm saying that as an analogy when you talk about relationships, same thing, when you have somebody, you were into something, she was into something, her mom tried to tell her, she didn't want to hear it. Yeah. So in the end, she ended up losing everything because she had a deaf ear to wise counsel. Yep. So, and that speaks to what I was talking about, is that some things you can't bounce back from readily. Yeah. Some consequences stick around forever. Yeah. Yeah. Others you bounce back from, others they stick around forever. And some consequences will cost you your sanity. Yeah. Look how many guys that went to the joint and came back institutionalized. Yeah. Because of their sanity. You go into the belly of the beast. You in with lion, tiger, bears, and snakes, and you got to be around that every day. And you in there trying to protect yourself. You get a sense of survival. Right. So now you come back out, and you still on that survival mode. Right. So you bring that harm to the community. You bring it to your home. Right. And you so these are the things that so. As leaders, we have to really just be, like I said, we have to really be cognizant about what kind of leader you want to be and what kind of leaders you look up to. Because a lot of guys want to look up to street guys as their leaders. All street guys ain't beneficial. They're not conducive to your growth. Because there's different types of leaders. There's different types of guys out there. There's shot callers. Those are the guys that seem to get a lot of guys in trouble. It's the shot callers. It's the ones who have who will put young people, anybody out there, and use them as pawns and ducks, so they can stay out of trouble. And then they'll use the thing called a no snitching code, but they snitch on you by putting you out there doing certain things out there, trick bagging you. That's the weak in your mindset. So in other words, they trick you into being a victim. Yes. By telling you it's okay for me to victimize you. Yeah. So it's like that's the biggest trick that the devil's never pulled was to tell you he don't exist. Yeah. Yeah. That's just an example right there. Yeah. And so you gotta be careful what type of people you allow to lead you. And that's, like I say, the difference between a leader and a shot caller. They're two different leadership styles. And a shot caller ruled by brute force or manipulation and deception. A leader
breeds more leaders. He's thinking about your well-being. He's thinking about your elevation. He's going to pour into you, not take from you. Know the difference between these things, and that's why we use these scriptures. That's why we use Saul, David, and Solomon, because it gave us a reality that we get to learn from all three mistakes, and only one redeemed themselves out of the mistakes that they all made. Even the one that a lot of people say did the hardest one, but he was the one that was receptive to repenting, and he still kept Israel together.
Yeah, he kept both. Yeah,
he kept Israel together.
Yeah, he kept
the 12 tribes.
Yeah,
he kept them all together. That was
together. Yeah.
he kept them all together.
Exactly.
You know, even out of his midst of that, he was still able to keep them together. Right. Then when it passed it on the torch on to his son, that's when it fell. That's when it fell, because he indulged in extramarital affairs. What he was trying to do, what I believe, and this is just my opinion, was Solomon thinking. He wanted to form all these alliances with all these different countries by marrying into them. And that was the thing, because now when you married into him, he had to accept all their gods and all their stuff. And so then he built temples for them. You know, so those are the things. And see, he started to compromise himself.
Which distanced him from God.
Yes, he lost his humanity. You know, so those are the things that, you know, men do and women do. Right. You lose yourself by doing stuff like that. Right. Trying to always looking for the next best thing. Right. And you got something here. If you put the same amount of work you put in over here, you can achieve what you want, what you think is over there.
You know how many men and women, how they say hindsight's 20/20, have looked back and realized that what they had, what they thought they had, was so horrible. Mm-hmm. They go out there, they get something worse.
Yes.
And then they want to go back to what they had, and now it's too late. You know, that's so be mindful of what you throw away, because one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yes. Yeah. You know? Another man or woman's trash is another woman's man's.
Look, you better be well versed on what your deal breakers are, and understand them really well before you cross that line. You know. And like I said, if it's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker. You know, you deal with that. But just because you just never want to be in a position where you regret, you know, having lost somebody good. You know, there's men who have lost great women. Mm-hmm. There's great women who have lost great men.
Yes.
You know, because they thought that the grass was green on the other side, and they realized once they got over there, they realized when it was too late that they had been tricked. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. that's what you don't want.
It's like that. It's almost like that thing when they say they had to stick with a carrot dangling, mm-hmm. and you chasing that carrot, never can reach, never grab it, never can get it.
To traffic, you chasing that carrot in the traffic.
You ran over, big toe throbbing, Flintstone. Right. Yeah, but you know, we're gonna close this thing out. You got what's your final thoughts on? And Jackie Washington said temptation. And brother, greetings back to you too, Carlos, and Derby. Much love to y'all, man. For some reason, one of my cameras went out, so it's not letting me read all my comments, because I see a whole bunch on there, but I can't get them all for some reason on my phone. I don't know why. What's going on? But I just want to say I appreciate you guys, and all the guys who have been reaching out to me, talking about that, you know, Brother Derby, you know, thanks for adding me in that group and telling me that, you know, you like us, we should be up, we should have our own podcast. I mean, our own show. You and a couple of brothers, man, I appreciate y'all, man. We working on it. We doing what we do. You know, we hope that we keep reaching people. You know, it ain't easy sitting up here just talking, and you know, and I don't want people to think we just talking. You know, we do really believe what we talking about. We do a lot of intensive research and studies on these stuff and subject matters, and life experience ourselves. And and more experience to come.
Mhm.
And so she said, yeah, she said, yeah, that's the name of the movie when you named it.
Unfaithful?
Unfaithful. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's Melinda.
Thank you.
And he said, thanks, Melinda, for letting us know. What's your final thoughts there, cuz?
Well, my final thoughts what they always are, and that is be the difference you want to see. I like that one.
Be the difference you want
Be
to
the
see.
difference because that's what leaders are.
Yeah.
Some people when they've seen um, things happen in the community that they view as a problem, they want to do something about it, and they want to put a voice to the problem.
Mm.
And you decide to lead. Well, and you said it earlier, it has to start with you.
Mm-hmm.
So be the change that you want to see, and others will follow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, be a visionary. Visionary is very important. He said, because even he says in the scripture, says, my people perish for lack of vision, lack of knowledge. Knowledge is vision. You got to have that vision of what you want to project and see changes. Like you said, when you have a vision and you can see the change, you become the change. But if you don't, you got dark shades on them, what we call NWA shade, Kumo D shades, you can't see. Put on some clear specs, and so you can actually see what you want to do. Quit looking through it ain't nothing wrong with looking through a peephole, but you only get your peripheral vision is only that far. Imagine looking out of a big picture window. So I always say, just like you said, and like brother Elijah used to say, Elder Elijah, to thyself be true. And that's one thing we have to do. To yourself, be true. Be true to yourself, and think about what leaders look. What leader?
Kind of leader you want to be.
What kind of leader you want to be, and what kind of leader you want to see in place, and how are you going to help facilitate that leader to move forward and to do the things that you know that needs to be done, because you can't expect one man or one woman to do a plethora of octopus tentacles of things without no support or no help from the community. Everybody wants to sit on their hands and then blame and complain about the person who's out in the front. How did that work? I don't even know how that even works. I just think that you think about it. You out here, you could be out here patrolling the streets to protect someone. You see someone about to run a light, and you know the light's about to change, and you can see the accident can happen before it happens. So you try to go over there and try to intervene before something takes place. Now, that's what leaderships do. They can see something before it happens, and then they take the initiative steps to do something about it and to prevent an accident to happen. A lot of time in our community, everybody's remaining silent now. We didn't have that growing up. Huh?
Now everybody operates from a knee-jerk reaction. It takes for something to happen for everybody to come out and say, "Oh," in an uproar.
Yes.
Instead of you seen it about to happen, you knew you had knowledge that it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You got wind that it was going to happen, but you did nothing about the fact that it was going to happen until it happened. Yeah. And then you come out and say, "I knew this was going to happen. It shouldn't have happened. This needs to stop happening."
Yes.
But then when that record is played again, same thing happens. Mm-hmm. You know what's about to happen, you say nothing. Mm. You have knowledge that it's going to happen, you say nothing. You have contact with the people who are a part of what's going to happen, and you say nothing. Mm. But then after it happens, you want to tell everybody that you knew was going to happen. Yes. Because so cousin Bopo told me that this was going to happen. And it's like, no, leaders step out ahead of things happening.
Yes.
And put a stop to it before it happens.
Mm. Yeah, you think Saul, David, and Solomon, you think if they knew, if they would have took the time to think and thought about the things they was doing before they done them, do you think they would have made a different change? But then it won't be there. Then it wouldn't be a great story to tell.
Would have been a lesson learned.
So,
Because see, those lessons, those things were not only for them, but also for us.
yes, yes,
So it was necessary for them to go through what they went through, just like it's necessary for us to go through what we went through to teach our children.
yes, yes.
Because if you've never been through anything, you don't have anything to teach.
And that's why I'm glad you brought that, because we can tell parents, don't beat yourself down.
No.
Community leaders, don't beat yourself down because people are unhappy with your work. You can't change everything in a day. Nothing's going to change today, especially when you got a lazy community. When you got a community who doesn't feel that they're responsible of change. Everybody, remember, everybody in the community are stockholders. This is what I call y'all. All y'all have to understand, y'all all are stockholders. Y'all are investors. Whatever you invest in your community is what you're going to get back out of it. If you pick up and run and go move into another prefab community that's already established, guess what you got to do? There's rules and regulations when you move over there. They already got a system greased up, and this is how they want their system. So you go in because this system over here, and then you have to get in rotation of that system. So if we sat and thought about it, if we sat and created a system in our own community, the same system that you running off to, because you want the best for your children, the best for yourself, or you want to feel like you live in a better life, as they say. There's nothing wrong with it. But then you can't complain about the hood if you ain't pouring nothing back. That's just like me. It's just like almost like going outside and I got this big old farmland. I complain about all the rocks and bricks, glass and weeds in it. And I got all these seeds over here. I know there's got to be some work that got to be done, right? I know I got to start cultivating this land. I got to pull all these bricks and weeds. And there's a lot of work that I might have to do. You know what? And you have to make the sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Once you make the sacrifice, then guess what? Now you're able to plant. Now after you plant, now everybody's able to be nurtured from it. So that's all I say. I want to say we us and ours, love, life, and loyalty. Thanks for showing up. And I don't know what happened. One of my cameras went down.
A rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but the